What's going on, man? The reason I say finally, by the way, is that we're welcome everybody who's listening. It's Ethan. This week I'm sitting down with Jordan. Jordan DiPietro. I'll introduce him in a second, but as is, I guess, almost a tradition with this show, getting Slack up and running before we could finally record was like a nightmare this time. It's gotten to the point, man, honestly, with all the two-factor authentication and stuff that I think I'm on board with somebody just stealing my identity. If we could just, they can have the identity if we can get rid of all the two-factor stuff.
Just get it over with. Give all your data.
Yeah, exactly. But it's great to have you here, man. And we're finally recording. So welcome in.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And okay, so for people who are listening, I mentioned a second ago, I'm here with Jordan DiPietro, who is a fascinating character for a number of different reasons. First of all, because he happens to be my boss's boss's boss, but more importantly, and currently runs, the media team at HubSpot. But also just a really interesting guy with fascinating experience in the media and newsletter space. So just to give you a brief overview, Jordan spent more than a decade at Motley Fool, first as a writer and then as one of their lead growth marketers and eventually CMO, I believe, of one of the divisions of the Fool, correct? Or is it
Chief Growth Officer? Yep.
Chief Growth Officer. Yep. Then our paths crossed at The Hustle when he joined that team back in 2000, was that 2020 or something like that? 2021?
2020.
Somewhere in there, I'm not sure, but he was crucial in the research and compilation of the newsletter guide that we wrote there, and which I've been talking about here for like a year now. It's almost published. And now, as I said, leads the entire media team at HubSpot. So that is newsletters, podcasts, YouTube, etc. So tons of experience. We're going to talk today about some really interesting experiments that he's run over the past and where he sees a lot of opportunity today. But I'm really excited to get somebody in here who's just had as much hands-on experience in the world of growing major media companies as you have. So I'll pause there for a second. What else would you add to your background? When people ask you, like, what's your deal, man? What do you tell them?
I think that covered it. That was pretty lengthy. I definitely don't go into all that. I usually just tell people, I'm a media marketing executive. Like you said, I worked at Motley Fool for over a decade, had a kind of originally a finance background, spent some years in like accounting, private equity, and really fell in love with investing personally. And that's how I found myself at the Motley Fool many years ago. But then professionally kind of fell in love with marketing, being a marketer, and then kind of just ended up going down the business path. And now, found myself with you at the Hustle, and now
look at where it landed.
Look what shit I stepped in that.
That's interesting. I don't think I realized that you actually had started off in private equity. What was it like? Can you just explain to me the transition of how you went from there into writing as sort of your primary focus?
Yeah. I mean, private equity, that sounds like I was, I had like a real sexy job or something. My undergraduate degree was in finance, and I found myself a couple years out of undergrad doing an accounting, like a low level accounting role for a public company called Lennar, ticker LEN. I still do the ticker thing because of spending 12 years in the Motley Fool. But so, I worked as literally, virtually one rung above an accounts payable person. So accounting, hated it. Didn't really like accounting, and didn't honestly really love finance at that point either, but I wasn't quite sure exactly what I wanted to do. So I bounced around a little bit, and eventually I decided, honestly, I wanted to go to grad school for international relations. And as I was like studying to take GMATs and GREs and saving for grad school, I got a job at a Philadelphia private equity place. I was doing, again, what they call fund accounting, organizing and sending out partner distributions to GPs, but like it was not sexy stuff. So I was really just doing it to kill time. End up going to grad school, and there's a bunch of stuff kind of in between that if you want to go into more, we certainly can. But yeah, when I started looking for roles when I was leaving grad school, again, I was totally in love with investing. I knew I didn't really want to go to work for like an investment bank or a traditional kind of financial company, and the Motley Fool was very different. There weren't many financial media companies or financial publications like them, and they were kind of goofy and irreverent. And weird, and all of that very much just attracted me to them. And I always loved writing. I've been writing like a pretty heavy writer and reader since I was a little kid. And so there was, again, a very, very entry level position at the Motley Fool as a writer and like what they called a sector head, which was basically I'd be in charge of like tech stocks and international stocks, and I could edit other people's content, and then I started writing it myself as well.
Interesting. What sparked the love of investing? You said that you were really, really in love with investing.
Yeah.
So where'd that come from?
So that's like an interesting, so this will take a personal turn for a little while. But so my dad was actually in love with investing, did it as a hobby, it was not his career. My grandfather, who's an immigrant and had a very blue collar job, was also in love with investing. It's an odd thing that my grandfather and my father both loved investing. And my grandfather actually put 4 kids through college. He worked at a stamp factory his entire life, but he was an excellent investor. And he was a very, very intellectual person. He taught himself investing and was incredibly successful. My dad did pretty well too. I hated fucking investing growing up because it's like one of those things your dad does it. You're just like, I hate this. And I literally, my mom and my sister and I growing up, my dad would be like walking around the house with a little notepad, mumbling about NASDAQ. And we'd be like, oh God, Dad, like just get away. So actually hated investing. And I was in my first year of grad school and I was going to GW for a 3-year program. I was going to leave in 3 years with an MBA and also an MA in international finance. And I was very much into international finance, microfinance, getting into the world of international development. And that's kind of what my goal was. And then in my first year of grad school, my dad very tragically passed away, had a brain aneurysm and passed about a week after my wedding, got married to my wife. And it just totally, really destroyed my family. It was, really one of those kind of like catastrophic events. My mom was quite sick. She had MS. We were all going through extreme bouts of like grief and shock. And I felt at the time like I didn't want to hand their money, my mom's money now, my dad passed, over to like some sort of financial advisor. My dad was very much like an independent thinker. He was very much kind of like anti-establishment almost. And it just seemed like it never even crossed my mind that I would take his hard-earned savings in retirement and be like, oh, I'm going to go to Edward Jones or like Schwab. I was like, fuck that. I got to figure out how to take care of my mom for the rest of my life. I was 25 years old. And it's like something switched in me. And literally, I think like a week after he passed, I emailed every single one of my MBA professors and said, how do I learn about investing? What do I read? And I just literally went crazy reading, all the Buffett books, Peter Lynch, Random Walk Down Wall Street. I literally I think near the end of my first year, totally switched my programs around. I ditched the MA because I didn't want to wait 3 years to start making money. I wanted to get out of college, start making money quicker. And I switched my MBA focus to finance and investing, started taking investing classes. And I just felt it's literally like a light switch just changed. And I just fell in love with investing.
Wow. It's so interesting how, I don't know if this is like an experience that all young men go through, but Mark Twain, maybe it was Mark Twain, had a joke about how like the older he got, the smarter his dad got. And I've always been sort of amused by how the years have like proven my dad right in ways that I could have never foreseen when I was young. So I'll give you one example. I always wanted to be a writer when I was really young. I mean, my whole life, I've always wanted to be a writer. And when I was young, this was right about the time that blogging had just started. And my dad goes, just blog every day. You should just just write one thing every day and just publish it. And me, I knew everything. And I was like, that's not how it's done, man. No, you got to send query letters and, you get some magazine credentials.
Right.
This was pre like the Facebook wave, the Twitter wave, all the creator waves. The joke that I always tell is I'm like, if I had just listened to him, we'd be having this conversation on my private island right now, like way ahead of the time.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, when you started reading those books, like how did that change your perception of your relationship with your dad? Because I think it's so interesting to have kind of like immersed yourself in a world that he was so passionate about, but at a time when unfortunately you guys can no longer like share it. How did that kind of change your perception of of who he was?
Man, what a great question. I was fortunate that I was close with him my entire life. And he was like my sister and I joke all the time. He was like the Italian folk hero for us, like since we were little. My mom, my sister, and I, we just adored him since, I can remember. And I always really cherished his advice and saw how hard he worked and also how he treated other people. And he was like a very high value, high integrity person. When it came to investing, I think the biggest kind of like aha or unlock moment for me was I realized, this is the actual way that you can build wealth. Like, unless you are a genius or you've gotten incredibly lucky, like this was the way that he saw my grandfather send him and his brother and sister to school. And this is the way I think that he was hoping to do it as well. And like, one of the things my dad always kind of famously said to me was, he was like, you're never going to be the smartest person in the room, but you could be the hardest worker. And my mom likes to make fun of me and be like, that's because dad knew you were kind of dumb. But I'm like, it says a lot about just who our family was. And, I think there was something about investing that was like, if you do it well, it's not a quick like get rich scheme, right? If we weren't talking about day trading, wasn't like hedging or, nobody was like trading gold futures on the side. This was like put money away every month, invest for the long term and just stack investments over a long period of time. And you can, hope to be wealthy. And I think that's how a lot of working class or now, middle class people can do it if they work hard for 20 plus years. It's just, there's a lot that made sense to me once I started learning about investing. And that's what honestly attracted me a lot to the Motley Fool was they didn't, even though the marketing, some people talk a lot about the marketing might be very aggressive, but once you a paying member of the Motley Fool, the biggest thing that we preach and the Motley Fool preaches is invest for the long term. We're not trying to sell, you're not trying to flip things. It's like buy and hold. It's very, very bold.
I had a similar experience realizing the power of investing in 2020, actually, I had heard a lot about, the power of investing and starting early and compounding and all that kind of stuff. And I was late to the party. I think I was 30 years old before I started my first like Roth IRA. But in 2020, one of the first, and I don't really buy individual stocks. I buy mostly index funds, but I had bought, I think, one share of Tesla because I liked what Elon Musk was doing. And there was one day where I made more money on that one share of Tesla than I did working my job. And that was like, that was for me, that was the light bulb moment where I said, oh my God, this is what it means to have your money make money for you.
Yeah.
And at that moment, it changed the way that I thought about how people should learn and teach their kids about money, because I've always had a checking account and a savings account. Like my parents started me super early on that. And I actually went back that day because I also have like I use Mint to track all my expenses.
Yep.
So I can tell you to the penny how much interest those accounts have earned me over the last 5 years or so, or no, 10 plus years. And it was like $28 in interest or something like that. Some puny figure. And I had earned 10 times that with with an investment account. And so it just changed everything about the way I thought about teaching people about money, learning money, all that kind of thing. Yeah. And it's funny to hear that, or not funny, but I understand what you're saying. When the light bulb goes on, all of a sudden it's life-changing, and it changes your relationship to money. Yeah. So you go to the Fool, you start writing, and then at some point you start to get this love for marketing. Can you talk me through it? Talk me through that, because it's rare. You don't have a lot of writers who are also passionate marketers.
Yeah. So I started writing kind of right away when I got there. And this was, kind of before the word content marketing, I think, was much of a thing, but that's what a lot of us were doing. I mean, we're writing some like, hardcore analytical equity pieces, but then we were also doing a lot of like, the 3 best stocks to buy during a recession, stuff like that, I'm like, not totally fluff, but it's like, in the middle there. And we were tracking everything that we did. So we would publish a piece, and the next day we would pull up a report and say, well, how many people clicked on that? And it was the first time that data had really like entered my mind. Everything in grad school and in undergrad was just like, anytime we worked with numbers, it was just like accounting. You know, it was just pure math. It wasn't like data. And so that was the first moment where I got that dopamine hit of like, I do a thing, and then the next day I'm like, I go and check that thing. And there's nothing like that hook. You know, it's like crack. And there was a big group of us at the Fool at that time who were all, there was probably 8 or 10 of us who all worked full time as writers. And I mean, and we would compete with each other and talk smack with each other. And everybody was looking to see who could write, we called them home run articles. There was like articles that got over 100,000 views in a week. And I mean, that's really what hooked me in and started me like making me care more about the business is, you know, trying to figure out, it became a game of sorts. You know, you try to see if I tweak this lever, if I change this headline, if I publish at this point in time, you know, if I only write articles about Apple during earnings week, like there's so many, and and I worked with a lot of really, really smart, fun people. And it was like the best experience in the world.
That's awesome. That seems to be a personality trait that is common among a lot of the content creators that I admire the most these days. So like I noticed Tim Ferriss early on seemed to have that. And he was doing this really before anybody was, you know, big in the what we'll call like the creator space or that, you know, lifestyle business. He used to write way back in 2008. He was talking about, you know, running tests on his blog to see where, you know, which portion of the header got the most clicks and where he could optimize, you know, marketing there. And then Sam's the same way. So Sam Parr, guy we both work with, he even way back in high school used to like post YouTube videos with different titles just to see if he could figure out like what made people click.
Yep.
So okay, so you get hooked by the data aspect. At what point do you actually become responsible for designing growth experiments for them? Was that something that you started as a writer, or was there did they eventually boot you into this growth executive role and then you started designing some of the tests that you published about recently? Or
It was like, I mean, again, I was there for a long time. So, I mean, I think after a writer, I got promoted to managing editor. So I was in charge of all the content on .com. After that, I got promoted to run the product team. And I'd say at the point at which, oh no, actually there was something right before that. After managing editor, I was in charge of Fool.com. And in charge of Fool.com for us is basically the equivalent of like kind of being in charge of content and also demand generation. So demand generation meaning, you know, all of the articles that you're reading on the site, of course, we're trying to provide you with great content. We're also trying to capture your email address. And then, you know, we've got a database marketing machine behind us that's kind of taking those leads, turning them into paying subscribers, just the same way that HubSpot does, right? So when I was in charge of Fool.com, that's when I really started thinking about marketing more than just like, oh, I'm gathering this data and there's a bunch of fun feedback loops. And, you know, I'm just like kind of having fun, but not really even knowing what I was doing. When I was in charge of Fool.com, that's really when I started learning about marketing. I had some great people that were bosses of mine throughout the years that had decades of pretty hardcore like direct response marketing roles at AOL, at Nat Geo, at a bunch of different places. And that's when I started really immersing myself in becoming like a much more kind of stringent marketer. You know, I've got 3 database marketing books on my shelf like that thick. I've got like 20, you know, copywriting and persuasion books and email marketing and retention marketing I was in charge of for a couple of years. But basically, so I was running Fool.com. After that, they put me in charge of product for I think 2 years or so. And then after that, I was basically running different marketing programs. And then I think at some point, 5 or 6 years in, my boss, who was the CEO, Tom Gardner, you know, I was almost acting honestly more like a right-hand person or a COO or something like that. And he chose the title Chief Growth Officer, and it landed, and that's where I kind of, you know, stayed. But I think I had that title honestly for probably the last 6 years there of my career, but I was always doing different things. I ran our international division for 2 or 3 years. I launched, you know, a startup in the last year called Blueprint. So I was always doing lots of different stuff. It's just, that was the title he gave me. Good stuff.
And at the point that you sort of officially stepped into that role, how big was the company? What were you guys doing in terms of revenue?
at that point, it's halfway. I really don't know for sure, but we could say somewhere between 100, 200 million revenue, something like that.
Okay, cool.
Feels
Yeah, I think it's helpful for people to know just how big this is, because I think sometimes from the outside, it's a little bit less surprising for us because we work in media. But when I first got in, I was definitely surprised to hear how big some of these companies are.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on is because you've been in charge of growth campaigns for paid newsletters or paid media products, like at a level that most people have never even considered as possible. So it's like, I mean, I'll just repeat that, somewhere between $1 and $200 million a year when you first get there. And then I've heard other estimates that, I mean, that Fool's quite a bit larger than that now, right? Do you have any kind of ballpark for how big they are these days?
Yeah, I think you could easily, double that or more, but haven't been there for over a year or so.
So like close to a $500 million company basically selling newspaper or newsletter subscriptions. So
and that's revenue, not market cap. So market cap is, it's a multi-billion dollar. It's just, but it's private.
What is the difference? So so the Fool's publicly traded then, or no?
No, it's not. But what I'm saying is like, so your market cap is, you apply a multiple on your revenue or your EBITDA. So if it were a publicly traded company, it would be at a multi-billion dollar, valuation. But still, even if you're a private company, you can, we had investment bankers come in twice a year and value the company. So, we don't put those numbers out into the public sphere, but we know internally like what the company is valued at, and it is a multi-billion dollar.
It's a lot. Yeah. It's a cool flex. So okay, so this is what I really wanted to dig into too. I think we've gotten to this point, and for people listening, I've been dying to have Jordan on for a while because we have this sort of back channel where we publish Twitter threads, and him, me, and a couple other colleagues are kind of always tweaking and saying, "Oh, is this a cool idea? Is this a cool idea?" And he has this one thread that he published, and I'm just going to read the hook. So the first tweet, and it says, "Over the past 10 years, I led growth for like a $1 billion plus company. I ran over 1,000 experiments, copy tests, order page tests, price tests, email tests. Here's an inside look at my personal notes, plus 9 growth hacks you can immediately steal." This thing blew up. And I think it's just so interesting for the people who are listening to this. Again, not only because a lot of people listening to this are trying to grow their own newsletter, but because you've like almost kind of seen the promised land. You know what's possible at higher scale. Mm-hmm. So what I wanted to do is I'm going to share my screen, and I wanted to kind of dig into some of these and just kind of hear you free form on them. I know we're going back several years at this point in terms of when you actually ran these tests. Right. So I'm not sure how much of this you still remember.
This will be a
good test.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let me share my screen. We can go from there. Okay, so there's, like I said, there's 9 things here that you outline. We're not going to get to all of them. I wanted to hop around a little bit. There's a few that I'm particularly fascinated in, and I want to hear your thoughts. But the first thing, before we get into like any one particular thing, can you just give people like a 10,000 foot view of what it was like to run a campaign at the Fool? Like, how many campaigns were you guys running, or experiments were you running at once? And what, just at the super broad strokes, what did the process for that look like?
Right. I think a good place to start is by saying there were, from a marketing standpoint, at the time when I was there was like 2 distinct teams. We had a front-end marketing team and a back-end marketing team. The front-end marketing team was responsible for marketing all of our lower-priced entry-level products. So, being in charge of Fool.com, like I said earlier, my job was to produce free content to get you to give us your email address. Then it was another person's job, the front-end marketing team, to get you to buy that very first product. So, $49, $99, $199. So you had one team that was like all in on that. And then you had a back-end marketing team, which I was responsible for a long time. That was responsible for creating more sophisticated, more complex, higher priced products and trying to get people excited about those products, which is like, in marketing terms, cross-sell and upsell acquisition. And the reason I make that distinction is because the way those 2 teams operated was very different. And, you tested things differently. So for instance, when you were working on front-end marketing, you had a massive amount of volume. You could launch a test and you could get results sometimes in a night. because you'll have 50,000 people in a test cell and a control cell. I mean, you would get massive amounts of volume. When you were doing back-end marketing, you had smaller volume, so sometimes tests had to run a little longer. Also, the stakes were very high because sometimes I was responsible for a $20 million campaign, $30 million campaign. And so when you're running a test and there's that much money on the line, you are just, very meticulous about the test. Yeah, it feels different. So sorry, now I'm forgetting what your actual first question
Well,
was.
let me build on that because
Yeah,
you're leading us in a perfect direction here.
Okay.
So you mentioned the difference between front end and back end. This is something that we talk about on this podcast quite often, so people are somewhat familiar with the
Okay,
concept of the different types of products and their place in the media ecosystem. Before I get to a specific tweet, because I think you talked about something specifically related to this, which would be great. I wanted to key in there because you said that the back end team was in charge of developing products and getting people excited about them. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you look for when you were coming up with ideas for good back-end products? Like what goes into the creation of a great back-end product in your view?
Yeah. And I guess maybe one kind of nuance to that is the back-end marketing team wasn't solely responsible. They were working in collaboration with the product team. The product team was really the ones that were responsible for making the product, but the marketing team is very involved in that. And then obviously the marketing team is completely responsible for the acquisition piece and generating the revenue. But for us, when you have a lot of people in a front end product, you have a lot of people to ask questions to. You have a lot of data to collect. You do a lot of surveys. Like, I mean, we used to meet with our members all of the time and asking them, like, what are your pain points? What would you rather have? What do you want to see? And for us, it was always like a good back-end product solves a huge problem for our members. Also, back-end products by nature, because they're more expensive, have fewer people in them. So there's a different way to think about scale with a front end and a back end product. So the way that I think about a product set is like your front end product that's going to have hopefully thousands and thousands of people. It really has to scale well, And so for us, like our flagship front end product was called Stock Advisor. It's 2 stock picks a month. That's what you get when you sign up for that. Now there's obviously a lot of content and stuff like that, but it's 2 stock picks a month. You go log onto the website, you get 2 stock picks, or you get an email. That's what it is. That scales infinitely, right? Doesn't matter if we're serving 10 people or 10 million. It costs us the same to deliver that product. Whereas our back-end products, not as scalable, and that's okay. So we could do more personalized things like member events, right? So if we wanted to throw a conference or put on an event, you can do that for people that are paying you a lot more money. Access increases a lot at higher price products. So, our co-founders, David and Tom Gardner, like, you also got increased access to them. You got to see sometimes inside, like sneak peek at their portfolio, what stocks they were buying. And you could do that more with a higher price product where there are fewer people in them, and that's okay. So like the way that you think about scale definitely changes in the product suite. And I think the way that you think about like technology and how that also plays a part in like kind of front end and back end product.
That's fascinating. And I almost got to control myself because I feel like I could dig in with you even deeper on that. Like, but I'm actually gonna put a pin in the product development for a second, and let's talk about selling these things. So one thing that you said in this thread, which was really interesting, this is one of the 4 things that I really wanted to dig into, is short form loses to long form. I'm just going to read this out loud for anybody who's listening. So there's basically 2 tweets here. It says short form loses to long form. Context: pricey products means lengthy decisions. Long form copy almost always outperforms. Short form landing page lost by 24%. And then there's some data below that is what he's referencing. So it's a test on conversion rates. And then he says the bottom line: short form copy can crush with products under $100. Long form copy crushes with products over $100. Hire a killer copywriter. They're expensive, but worth their weight in gold. Can you talk to me a little bit about this? And just, is this what we're talking about? The difference between front end and selling front end and back end? Can you sell front end with short form and back end with long form? Or do you think even a short form or even a front end product, if it's over that $100 price point, really needs the long form copy?
We never were able to test anything short form that beat long form for any of our back end products.
Wow.
And honestly, I don't even know, maybe they have in the last 2 years, but I don't even know if short form has like ever beat long form for us. I say the reason that I kind of put a little bit of a caveat when I wrote on there that, sometimes short form can crush with products less than 100 is because now I see it done at lots of other places, right? There's so many creators selling on Twitter and elsewhere and Substacks, and people have gotten a lot better, I think, over the years at selling $50 products, $30 templates, or building trust with an audience and then selling something, memberships with podcasts. So it's done for sure. But I mean, most people, if they're familiar with Motley Fool marketing, will know that when we are selling a product, you will get an email. You'll probably get many emails. And those emails will link to, what we call a sales letter or a long form landing page. And oftentimes it's like 1,000 to 2,000 words. I mean, they are long landing. And over a decade of working there, I've gotten my fair share of complaints from internally. I mean, people at the Motley Fool who are employees are like, can we stop writing these long form sales letters? Customers like, can you guys just get to the point quicker? Sure. And then every time we test it, it loses. And
That's-
it's hard because you want to just be able to say, sure, we'll just send you a 10-sentence email. And if you want the product, you'll buy it. But it doesn't, that's just not actual reality. Every time we wrote long form, it absolutely crushed.
Do you have any theory for why that is? Because I totally believe it, and yet I'm one of these people who will hit a landing page like that. I scroll the entire thing, and I'm the one who goes, "Do people read this?"
Yeah.
So, like, what do you think it is? Do you think it's that? Do you think people just like see all the text and they don't even read it, and it just builds so much trust that they're like, okay, well, clearly this is legit because there's so much writing here.
No.
Or I don't know. What do you think it is?
I think that when you're going to spend some amount of money, we'll just say over $100 on a product, it's actually not as rational as a decision as people think. You'd think that like, well, the more expensive the product, the more rational I'm going to be, so I'm going to do more due diligence and stuff. And I actually think that it becomes more emotional than people think. And the thing that really gets people motivated to do something is like storytelling and narratives that play on their emotions. And we have and had some of the best copywriters, I think, in the world. And they can tell an incredible story in a couple thousand words. And those are the things that make you say, holy shit, this little small micro cap Canadian company called Shopify might actually be the next Amazon. I think I'm going to buy this thing. Like those copywriting campaigns can do that. And it's just, you can't, I shouldn't say you can't, I haven't seen it done in a couple hundred words where somebody can really move you by telling a powerful story like they can in a couple thousand words.
I'm glad you keyed in on the storytelling aspect there, because I agree with you. And I think this is actually one thing that a lot of people get wrong trying to sell these types of things. They'll sell the benefits or like the features, but yeah, not necessarily paint a picture of somebody's life with this new thing. And I see this a lot, specifically with what we would consider like front end products. So a lot of creators are out there and they'll create a paid newsletter, and they either just sell the benefit or the features, or it'll be like a personality thing. Like, hey, support me on Patreon, support like, you can pay for my newsletter if you really enjoy it or something like that. I think that's one place that a lot of people struggle to actually sell paid media. What are some other places that you think people go wrong in the creator industry? Like based on what you've seen doing this at such a big scale, where are creators kind of getting it wrong right now?
I think in general, it's funny because as popular as it is to talk about copywriting on Twitter or elsewhere, I don't actually see a ton of people doing it that well. Like we invested a ton of resources in copywriters, both hiring the best, starting our own programs. Like I oversaw a copywriting, like basically university at the Fool, where we call them copy cups, but these are basically copy cup is somebody is very, very junior copywriter, where we kind of took them in and we would literally put them through copy classes and like train them up to be copywriters. And just don't see a lot of people doing that sort of long form anymore. And honestly, I think just the main reason, it's just really hard. It's actually just, it's a lot easier just to be like, hey, whatever, what did you just say? Find me, I'm on Patreon or like whatever it is. I just don't see a ton of people putting in the time or energy. And it's just one of those things. Also, really, really good copywriters are expensive. But the best copywriters that I know will, be happy to do things like take a fee and then, do a royalty. So they only win if you win. So that's a lot of copywriter comp structures are set up like that. So I just always tell people like it's worth it to find a great copywriter.
Can you give people listening like one or two of your favorite exercises that you would use to take copy cubs and like train them up? What does that actually look like?
So this could almost actually be the perfect cue, but it's not. I'll tell you. So I actually am working right now on a copywriting course, and I'm actually, so the best thing would be if I said, actually, I'm done. You can go to www. But I don't have that part because that would be like the perfect setup. But I am actually at the point where I'm done the course. I've written everything out. I have all my modules done, but now I actually need to sit down and like put it into some sort of course module or CMS or something. I will obviously give you the first free version of that, but the loose structure is you do a lot of looking at sales letters and what has worked in the past, and then it's actually like there's a part of copywriting that's very scientific. Every single great sales letter has similar parts. You've always got a headline that does X, Y, and Z. You've got an introduction that does X, Y, and Z. Your body copy should follow this kind of flow. And there's, lots of people have written about it, Cialdini and others, but there's like lots of different persuasion tactics that you use at different points in your copywriting or sales letter. And we walk you through it pretty methodically. And, so after you do a little bit of studying in the module of like great sales letters and persuasion, then you start with headlines. And I just have you work through the different types of headlines. And then I've got like exercises at the end of every kind of module so you can work on it. So it's like work on your headlines. The next thing might be, all right, let's just start with your subhead. So right under the headline is like one or two sentences is your subhead. And I have a bunch of exercises where you just work on that. And then maybe the next module is, all right, now you're just going to work on the first page of your body copy. And the whole thing kind of flows, I think, nicely. And the goal is that when you're done the course, you will actually have like your first sales letter that you've written for a product.
That sounds great. I had no idea you were working on that, man. That's cool.
Yeah.
This is another question that I had related to the copywriting. So you had said something interesting, which is that like a lot of people are not really doing this. And I agree with you. And if I had to guess just from my own experience, I think part of the reason might be this idea that like volume is so important, constantly putting out new stuff. There's a lot of pressure to put stuff out. And it's hard to do really good work and a lot of it. And there's part of me that sort of suspects like maybe you could take your foot off the gas a little bit. And like if you do really good copywriting, it takes longer to get it out the door, but it works for you harder and it produces better results. Do you think that's true? And if so, how much time was invested in let's just say that landing page sales letter for these front end products, say?
For the front end products?
Yeah, let's just say front end for now, because I think that's where most creators are kind of starting.
I mean, for the front end products, you would, you'd have, say, somewhere between 3 to 5 copywriters that were working on various front end products. And if we were launching a new product, maybe it would take them a couple weeks to write a sales letter, go through various rounds of edits. But then we always tested it. So if they wrote one sales letter, we would usually have them write a different lead, like a different headline and lead, so that we could at least do an A/B test of like the control would be like the one they like the best, and then we would have them go and write a different headline and lead that we could test against the control. And then a lot of it also is just having people that are constantly focused on optimizing, because you can have one landing page that works, but you can test that headline every day if you have enough volume. We did. Some people are like, dude, I only get 50 people that visit my website every day. Like you can't. So it depends. But yeah, I mean, we were constantly testing your headlines, your CTAs. Price testing was a huge thing that I love to do at the pool. That's a really, really big one. Probably an underrated one, if I had to say.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, we had a whole team that was, dedicated to this stuff, like direct response, just maniacs. It's like all we cared about.
This might be a dumb question, but I don't come from this world. So of those things where it's like investing time in the good copywriting, testing variations on the copywriting, or maybe producing more products, for somebody who's, say, a solo creator with maybe a little bit of contract help on the side, which of those would you advise they spend the most, like which of those is going to have the biggest effect for them? Is it really investing in getting the copywriting right, or is it like throwing more at the wall in terms of more products, or do you think it's the iteration on a single landing page?
I think I mean, if you're a small time creator with a small team, I think copywriting, I would say, would be more important because it's like you're trying to squeeze all the juice as you can. Like let's just say you've got one product and you've got a landing page. Say you're doing $10,000 a month. Well, it wouldn't be absurd to think if you had a great copywriter come and redo that landing page, maybe you get a 30% lift. Okay, well now you just made $3,000 extra dollars a month versus what I think is people's natural inclination to launch more products because it's like just do more. Okay, I got another product, and I got to do this webinar, and I got to answer this email, and I'm going to do a new series. And it's like that stuff works. I mean, I do it too. It works, but it's also a straight up way to like get burnt out, especially if you're like a creator with a small team. Also, it's the more products you have, the more people you have to service at different price points with different different features, different product sets. Like it's hard having a lot of product. I mean, at a certain point, I think in my first 5 years at Motley Fool, we probably had, I don't know, 18 products or something like that. And we definitely went through a period of time where we started condensing, closing ones that maybe didn't have the best track records, thinking about how to simplify. But it's a lot, more products is definitely more work. Whereas if you can hire a great copywriter once, it could have a pretty big impact without giving you a ton more work.
See, this is why I wanted to have you on, because I sometimes like get in trouble. Well, not really. Everybody is pretty forgiving with me publicly so far, but but there is one thing that I'll say pretty frequently, which is like people will ask how big does my newsletter need to be in order to start selling ads? And the number that we have come up with through the course of like the research on the newsletter guide is like really 70,000 to 100,000 subscribers
to start selling ads.
Yeah, generally speaking, but then I always have to caveat it and say, but we're researching multi-million-dollar newsletters. Like if you're just a creator who wants to just make a living, yeah, you can start a lot smaller. But I do think that there's sort of this, I don't know what it is. I feel like there's almost like a false idea that is being promoted by some voices in the creator space that launching these products is less work than it really is. Like the reason I say 70 to 100,000 subscribers is because selling ads is a lot of work, and you need to be bringing in pretty significant amount of money in order to support the amount of work that it takes to do that. And what you're pointing out really well here is that building paid products is the same thing. And sure, you don't have to do it on the same scale as the Motley Fool, but I think a lot of people, when they're thinking through, I want to launch a paid newsletter, might not think about, the different support considerations that come in to that, or how much time goes into writing the landing page. And like, if you're not investing in those things properly, you're not really going to get the money out of the business that you could. And so I keep trying to just clarify for people like what this really looks like when professionals sit down to do it, because there's a whole world out there of like media professionals that don't mess around with like selling $200 ad spots in a 600 person newsletter necessarily.
I mean, the other thing I'd say though about the advertising and like how big your list has to be is some of it depends on how qualified your list is. So I have, this, but a friend of mine and I bought a website a couple years ago, and that website is like a business website, kind of focuses on like agile methodology, lean, Six Sigma, that kind of stuff. We've got like, I think, a 60,000 person list, and it does incredibly well. And we sell ads on that, no problem. because it is very, very focused on a particular niche. And so, if somebody has a newsletter of 40,000 people, but it's about, whatever X, Y, and Z topic, and that topic happens to be one that, is somewhat easy to monetize, that's great. Like, you don't actually need a monster size list. Like, I'd rather have a smaller list that's super, super engaged on a pretty monetizable topic than like a massive list. It's kind of like meh. So and then the other thing I would also say is, it's getting easier and easier to be able to sell ad inventory in your newsletter. So as I'm sure Nathan and the folks at ConvertKit have launched their kind of program there where they're helping people sell their ad inventory. Our good friends Ben and Katie from The Hustle have started their own thing, Man Rev. So they're helping people. So it is getting a little bit easier. Like, if you want to sell ad inventory in your newsletter, you don't have to go and hire 8 salespeople. There's actually some easier ways to do that now. And that's a lot different than it was even just like 3 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah, those are great points. And I think one of the reasons that I like to have people like you on here is because it shows people outside of the industry like what's really possible. I think the biggest thing is just knowing what's possible, because it's otherwise it's easy to do a lot of work and not necessarily get as much out of it as you really could if you know what's possible. And this is why we talk about the model, like the free newsletter, front end product, back end product, is because you don't have to guess your way through it as much. A lot of these paths have already been paved, All right, man. I can't believe we're already at the top of the hour here. We're definitely going to have to do a round 2, probably like around 3, 4, and 5 as well.
We only got to one test.
I know. But this was, we got to the one test, but there's a whole bunch of value in here that I didn't even expect to have in terms of like how to think about scaling paid newsletters, how to even think about like what types of products you produce for paid newsletters. There's a whole bunch of stuff, copywriting in here that I think people are going to get a lot of value out of. So thank you again for coming on. Before we part ways, do you want to say anything else in terms of where people should check you out or anything else that you got in the works? The course, your Twitter handle?
Yeah, like they can check me out at DiPietro Media is my Twitter handle. And the course, I guess maybe I'll have to come back on once the course is launched. Or if you are somebody listening to this and you want to help me out and get this course into some sort of CMS, into some digestible shape, I'll take that as well. But yeah, no, I'm excited to be on here, man. We've known each other for a while, and I've been dying to kind of chat with you formally. Maybe we'll do a round 2 and we'll do like a rapid fire through some of these experiments.
Hell yeah. And I'm just going to double down on what Jordan just said, people. So if anybody's listening and you're like, I would really love a chance to kind of meet people in this industry, there's an opportunity right there to meet one of the like OGs. So tweet at him, offer your help, and then you're going to have a chance to potentially work alongside somebody who really knows what they're doing. No, what does Sam always say? No small boy stuff. So only get in touch if you're serious.
Oh yeah, I didn't even say this. Actually, yeah, I do have a site, dpietromedia.co. I do some advisory stuff on the side. So I've got a couple small media brands and creators that I work with on the side, doing like advisory, business coaching, stuff like that. So if you are interested, you can find me there as well.
Do you talk about any of the clients that you work with there? Because I know them behind the scenes. I don't know if you list them, but just people listening, they're definitely newsletters that you've heard of.
Yeah, for sure. Well, obviously I worked with Sam and the team at The Hustle prior to the acquisition, working with Cody Sanchez and the Contrarian Thinking team right now, doing a lot of cool stuff over there. Probably the only folks that people might know off their head.
Right on. All right, man. Well, this was a blast. Thank you for coming on. Everybody listening, I hope you enjoyed this. Let us know what you think. If you have more questions for Jordan, you can tweet at him or you can hit us up and we will pull him back in for a round 2. Until next time, I'll talk to you all soon. Later. Yeah.